When I sharply snapped back, Michelle scowled at me. "Stop leeching off Dad." Hearing Michelle's upset voice, I made up my mind. Oh, it's no use. I gave up in my heart. My feelings for Michelle did not reach her. The emotional bond one was trying to establish with Michelle was severed. Michelle needs to reflect on her actions. She must face the consequences of her actions. And I will tell her the truth. My name is Rachel, and I am 50 years old. I have been married to Alex for 5 years. Both Alex and I had been married before we met each other. I divorced my previous husband because he had an affair. One day when I came home, I found divorce papers from the lawyer in the post. Since then, my ex-husband never returned. I didn't even know where my ex-husband was, but I submitted the response to the court. Since then, I haven't seen or even heard from my ex-husband. We used to argue a lot and weren't very close, so I had expected this to happen someday. But it was so sudden that I couldn't eat and was very depressed at the time. I couldn't just sit around, so I threw myself into my work. I filled the void in my personal life with work. I worked frantically. After work, I frantically studied marketing and management. Thanks to that, I didn't even think about remarriage or dating, and before I knew it, I was 40. My family runs a small diner. It's a cozy place that serves set meals during the day. The food is good, plentiful, and affordable, making it popular with the townsfolk. It's a small town, but almost everyone must have eaten our food at least once. In particular, my father's chicken steak is the restaurant's specialty. When Alex proposed to me, I was over the moon, but hearing that he had a daughter made me anxious about the future. Will this work out? The thought of suddenly becoming the mother of an adult daughter was crushing. My buoyant feelings had completely deflated. Now, my heart feels heavy and dark. That's when I got a text from Alex. "No rush on your response." I meant every word I said earlier. His unhurried reply calmed my turbulent heart as if the tide was receding. Yes, Alex is serious and kind. He would surely support me through anything. And as for his daughter Michelle, though she's a concern, she's an adult. She won't throw a tantrum like a child. She will understand about Alex and me. I decided to accept Alex's proposal. When I told Alex I would accept his proposal, he was overjoyed. Seeing Alex express his happiness so openly, I felt truly glad to have chosen to be with him. Since we were both remarrying, we just had a small dinner to introduce each other to our families. But Michelle was in the worst mood she had ever been in. She was irritable and took out her feelings on the staff. Ugh, so annoying. "Come on, bring the next dish." "Michelle, calm down." "Shut up. Don't you order me around, old lady." The term old lady took my breath away. I had met Michelle a few times before, but this was the first time things had turned out this way. Is this Michelle's true nature? If that's the case, she might be harboring dissatisfaction with Alex's and my marriage. After the introduction party, I discussed Michelle's behavior that day with Alex. Perhaps we should consider postponing the marriage. Wouldn't it be better if Michelle sorted out her feelings first? To my words, Alex shook his head. Indeed, Michelle's attitude today was problematic, but she has already moved out of the house, and we won't be seeing her every day, right? Being tied down by an independent daughter forever doesn't seem right to me. Indeed, since Michelle had already moved out, it wouldn't be like we'd see her every day. Alex suggested that being confined for so long during today's introduction party might have irritated Michelle. Normally, Michelle is quiet and not the kind to get angry like that. Please, give Michelle a chance. She's really a good kid at heart. Encouraged by Alex's words, I decided to proceed with the marriage. At this moment, I was determined to marry Alex and live my life with him. Yet, every time I saw Michelle, I was reminded of that incident, which only increased my anxiety. With these worries, I started living with Alex. We bought an apartment located halfway between my company and Alex's. Michelle was living alone in an apartment near her company, so it was just Alex and me living together. The first 2 years passed without incident, and we had a happy time. The only tough part was during the holiday season when we meet Michelle, but other than that, it was peaceful. However, in the 3rd year of our marriage, we faced a significant problem. Michelle moved in with us. Apparently, the apartment where Michelle lived was undergoing major renovations. Because of the noise and the comings and goings of the workers, it's unsettling, so I'm moving, Michelle said, and moved in with us. I had a bad feeling about it. And that feeling turned out to be right. We turned a room we used as a storeroom into Michelle's room. Michelle complained about it being cramped and poorly lit, yet we somehow managed to convince her to tolerate it. For the moving-in celebration, we decided to have pizza. When I was about to order our usual delivery, Michelle went ahead and placed an order from Famous Steakhouse. The dishes from there are indeed delicious. But it's also quite expensive. It would cost about 5 times more than the food we usually eat. I was about to refuse, but Alex gave me a look. I've recently realized that Alex is lenient with Michelle. He tends to give in to Michelle's whims. Perhaps that's why Michelle gets upset easily when things don't go her way. And she generally has an attitude. It seems like she thinks of the staff in any store as her servants. I've never seen Michelle use words like excuse me or thank you to the staff. Not just to the staff, but to me as well. Living with Michelle was like that. I was feeling down, but this was too much to worry about from the start. In the end, we ordered the food as Michelle wanted. When the dishes arrived, Michelle's words were, "It's late." Our order was supposed to have been refused at first due to the sudden order, but Michelle insisted and made them deliver. And she complained that they were late. I apologized profusely to the delivery person while receiving the dishes. The payment, of course, came from our wallet. As I checked the contents of the 3 delivery boxes, I found 2 assortments of appetizers and steaks and 1 box of hot dogs. While I was puzzled, I laid out the food on the table. As I began preparing drinks and soup, Michelle and Alex took their seats. Michelle poured beer for Alex, raised her glass with a cheers, and began to drink. To Michelle, I must be nothing more than a servant or a maid. Alex doesn't admonish Michelle. Is there something going on? When I sat down at the dining table, in front of me was the box of hot dogs. I let out a soft, and Michelle looked at me with a smug half-smile. That should be enough for you. With a snort, Michelle began eating the appetizers. I had some vegetable sticks, while Michelle enjoyed the shrimp cocktail, fresh salad, and chicken wings. It was a clear act of spite from Michelle towards me. I thought this would surely anger Alex, but all he did was sigh as he looked at Michelle. Alex offered his box of appetizers to me. Have some of this. I nodded slightly and took some portions from Alex. I was tempted to scold Michelle, but restrained myself, considering that a confrontation on the first day might complicate our future cohabitation. Moreover, I felt disadvantaged, as if I had usurped Alex from Michelle. Thus, living with Michelle began in the worst possible way. Alex doesn't talk much about Michelle. Whenever I ask about her, he just says, "She's at a difficult age, please forgive her." While working, helping out at my parents' house, studying, and doing household chores, I was already swamped. Now I had to take care of Michelle on top of everything. Michelle is simply selfish. She does nothing around the house. It's hard to believe she lived alone before. Moreover, Michelle's requests are incredibly bothersome. Even a single piece of clothing came with a litany of instructions, which items required dry cleaning, which should be hand-washed, and which needed air drying. When it comes to food, she specifies supermarkets and even the origin of the products. I usually plan meals based on sales and featured items at the supermarket, but that's not possible when accommodating Michelle's preferences. I found myself planning meals while also checking the recipes on the internet. As a result, our household expenses have nearly doubled. Michelle doesn't contribute financially to the household at all. Even when I talk to Alex about it, he just says, "Please bear with it." Unwilling to stir up unnecessary conflict, I chose to tolerate the situation. I reluctantly decided to cut back on work. I was valued and had high expectations at my company. There were even hints of a possible executive position in the future. But now, family comes first. I applied for reduced working hours at the company. This decision will likely close the door on any career advancement. But I do it for Alex and Michelle. I've decided to endure. While I was shopping for dinner at the supermarket after work, I received a call from my mother. The call was to inform me that my father had been hospitalized. What? Dad's in the hospital? After hanging up the phone, I hurried to the hospital. Our family home is relatively close by, so I arrived in about an hour. In the hospital room, my father was watching a baseball broadcast on TV with earphones in. Noticing me, he took out his earphones and smiled at me. Mom just exaggerated over the phone. Haha. Relieved, my legs gave way, and I slumped to the floor. My back's been hurting. My father explained. It seems years of standing work had taken a toll on his back. I've decided to go through with the surgery, he told me with a laugh. At that moment of relief, I remembered something important. I hadn't informed Alex or Michelle about any of this. I pulled out my cell phone from my shopping bag. There were countless missed calls from Michelle. I regretted being late. My heart was pounding. I hurriedly called Michelle back. Michelle's voice sounded displeased. Where are you and what are you doing? Hurry back and make my dinner. I apologized reflexively. I'm sorry. My dad's been hospitalized. Michelle was silent for a moment but then started scolding me sharply. Huh? Your dad? Your dad, really? Michelle's tone became vulgar and aggressive. I felt intimidated and shrank back. I replied in a small voice. Yes, he was suddenly hospitalized. And what does that have to do with my dinner? Michelle's reasoning was becoming absurd. You're my mother, right? Understand? It's a parent's job to make meals for their child. It might be understandable if Michelle were still in elementary or middle school. But Michelle is 26 and has lived alone before. She's fully an adult. For such an adult to demand meals from a parent is beyond harassment. I felt compelled to stand up for myself. I'm not good with Michelle's assertive tone or harsh words. Although I was scared of being yelled at, I decided to confront Michelle. Is it wrong to worry about my dad? You should understand. I could hear Michelle gasp over the phone. Shut up. Don't talk back to me. I must have hit a nerve. Michelle seemed taken aback. If it were your dad, you'd rush to his side, wouldn't you? Michelle fell silent. Perhaps she was imagining if it were Alex who had been suddenly hospitalized. Surely, Michelle would be worried if something happened to Alex. That's what I thought. However, Michelle's response was beyond my expectations. Huh? I'd ignore it if my dad was hospitalized. I was speechless. I wanted to believe it was a lie. Anyway, I said, sorry, but you'll need to eat out today, and hung up. This call made one thing clear to me. Michelle doesn't see me as her mother at all. In fact, she doesn't even see me as a person. She must think of me as a mechanical servant or a slave. Otherwise, she couldn't say such heartless things. It's saddening, but I can't just dwell on sadness. Things can't go on like this. I felt a strong need to take action. Even after my father is discharged, he won't be able to work as before. There's only so much my mother can help with. I need to address the situation at my family's home quickly. Balancing my family's needs, taking care of Michelle, household chores, and work was impossible. I decided to resign from my job. Though the company tried hard to retain me, there was no other way. Just as my father was discharged and we managed to reopen our shop, something happened to Alex. Alex ended up being hospitalized. Moreover, his condition was quite severe. Dr. Anderson, the chief physician, said he might never be discharged. When I informed Michelle of Alex's condition, she reacted nonchalantly and said something unbelievable. Does this mean it's going to cost a lot of money? Michelle seems more concerned about money than Alex's health. What could this mean? I couldn't understand her reasoning. Does Michelle not care about Alex at all? This is not the time to worry about money. Do you understand? I became emotional and retorted. I know that. But if we don't have money, we'll be in trouble, won't we? Michelle pulled out her cell phone and started making a call. Hello, Uncle John? Actually, Dad is sick and has been hospitalized. It seemed Michelle was calling Alex's brother. She was speaking in an uncomfortably sweet tone. So, I was hoping you could help with the hospital bills. Michelle was scheming on the phone, trying to get her uncle to pay for the hospital bills. Then, you can ask Mom about the rest. After ending the call, Michelle gave me a cold smile. I felt a chill down my spine from that smile. So, you'll have to talk things over with Uncle John. Humming a tune, Michelle went back to her room. I was still reeling from Alex's hospitalization when Michelle's actions left me stunned. After a while, I received a call from my brother-in-law. I explained Alex's condition and the outlook for the future. I broke down crying midway, but I managed to explain everything. I also assured him that I would take care of the hospital bills, so he shouldn't worry. After hanging up, I slapped my cheeks with both hands to psych myself up. I can't afford to mope around over this. But bad things continued to happen. After our marriage, Alex was entrusted with managing his parents' company. However, the business began to struggle. The cost of raw materials had been rising for years, leading to higher purchase prices and reduced profits. The company was so strapped that it couldn't afford to pay employee salaries. In the past, Alex's family used to help my family's business, but now the roles were reversed, and my family was supporting Alex's company. With the business in trouble, Alex had cut his own salary. So, I was paying for the hospital bills with my salary. Most of the insurance policies list the company as the beneficiary. Ironically, Alex's insurance money gave the company a bit of a breather during these hard times. In such a difficult time, Michelle lashed out at me. The reason was a photo on my phone of a dining scene at a restaurant. Don't mess around. Using other people's money for such luxury. Michelle berated me with vulgar language and an aggressive tone. The photo was from a time I was asked to sample dishes at a restaurant I visited for work. A client took the photo and sent it to me, but unfortunately, it backfired. You're using our money for stuff like this? Michelle's words made me realize something. It seems she's under the impression that I'm living off Alex's money. The reality is quite the opposite. Currently, I'm the one providing for most of our household expenses. I've repaid all the money I borrowed from Alex in the past, with interest. Michelle's anger didn't subside. It seemed futile to say anything at the moment. Michelle's command, "Get out," compelled me to leave the house. I left a single piece of paper on the dining table. I chose to spend the night at a hotel. It would be useless to explain anything to Michelle. No, if I tried to explain, she might start depending on my money. I wanted to avoid that. I resolved to stick to the plan and take appropriate action. I made a promise to myself. I went to visit Alex's hospital room. I visit every day, but today felt special. Michelle didn't come today either, huh? Alex gave me a sad smile. His smile always reassured me. I'm sorry for being so inadequate. Alex shook his head. It's not that. It's my fault. Michelle turned out this way because of me. Alex began to share something he hadn't told me about Michelle before. Michelle is not Alex's biological child. His ex-wife had an affair, and Michelle was the result. Alex found out just before his ex-wife passed away. Hearing this, Alex felt an indescribable anger. The person most at fault was lying in bed, soon to pass away. He couldn't direct his anger anywhere. Michelle wasn't to blame, and she still thinks of Alex as her real father. His ex-wife passed away without revealing anything about the other man involved. Alex was left with unresolved anger. He couldn't treat Michelle the same way as before and ended up pushing her away. For Michelle, her mother suddenly disappeared, and her father became distant. It's no surprise her personality became twisted. From that point on, Michelle ceased to trust anyone, viewing Alex solely as a financial resource. Since then, I've become nothing but an ATM to Michelle. Alex said with a sad smile. Michelle's selfishness is excessive. Moreover, her disdain for others is over the top. Michelle found out I wasn't her real father when she was in high school. Alex said she didn't seem that surprised. She must have had her suspicions, he added with a sarcastic smile. I explained to Alex what I was about to do. Initially, he looked reluctant. His expression conveyed a sense of skepticism, as if questioning, is all that really necessary? I've already looked into it. If I don't do it, things could get even worse, I told him. If I don't, someone else surely will. Alex closed his eyes, deep in thought. I decided to wait quietly. After a while, Alex opened his eyes. All right. I'll leave it to you. I held Alex's hand. His hand felt bony and had become much smaller. I struggled to hold back my tears. Forcing a smile, I left the hospital room. As I stepped into the corridor, I saw Dr. Anderson. I handed Dr. Anderson a scientific magazine showcasing the latest medical technologies. Please help my husband, I said to him and left the hospital. Now, it's just a matter of taking action. To psych myself up, I slapped both of my cheeks sharply with my hands. This always helps me focus. After spending a night at a hotel, I checked my cell phone for messages and returned home before noon the next day. I could hear the sound of the TV and Michelle's laughter coming from the living room. In the living room, Michelle was watching TV and laughing heartily. It was a rare sight. She's usually in a foul mood, but today she seemed happy. Looking around, I noticed that several things were missing. I noticed the absence of photos of Alex and me, souvenirs from our trips, and other decorative items from the living room. Huh? Some things are missing. My mutterings to myself prompted a reaction from Michelle. Oh, I threw them out. Your stuff. Shocked, I entered the bedroom. The room was empty. No computer, no TV, no stereo. Even the bed and furniture were gone. The closet was empty too. I returned to the living room and confronted Michelle. What's the meaning of this? Michelle looked at me with disdain while lying on the sofa. They were needless, so I disposed of them. I put my hands on my hips, visibly angry. Needless? What are you going to do? When I raised my voice, Michelle made a face of disgust. She averted her gaze from me and sighed dramatically. I'm tired of living with you. Michelle had said something outrageous. What does she think this place is? What do you mean by that? This home belongs to Alex and me. When I retorted sharply, Michelle's face turned sour. Stop leeching off Dad. Leeching? What could she possibly mean by that? Michelle suddenly brought up something unexpected. Come to think of it, she had mentioned our money before. Could Michelle be under some grand misunderstanding? As I stood there, unable to respond, Michelle's irritation grew. Do I have to spell it out for you? I'm saying stop depending on Dad's money. Michelle and I never got along well. But I had always tried to be considerate towards her. I've complied with all of Michelle's requests, even those that felt like harassment. Even if it was harassment. I wanted to get along with Michelle. As the second wife, I've always strived to be kind and loving, feeling somewhat guilty. Yet, I received such treatment in return. I wasn't leeching off anyone. I was just trying to do everything for Michelle. I wanted to convey this to Michelle, yet the words eluded me. While I struggled to speak, Michelle added insult to injury. Dad's not coming back anyway, so there's no reason for you to be here. That's not true. Michelle raised her voice. Shut up. I don't want to hear your excuses. Hearing Michelle's hysterical voice, I made up my mind. It's no use, I realized. I gave up in my heart. My feelings for Michelle did not reach her. The emotional bond I was attempting to forge with Michelle had been severed. I felt my feelings for Michelle fading. Just a moment ago, I thought of us as family, but now we're complete strangers. From the beginning, it was clear Michelle was only using me for her own convenience. That's why she could so boldly drive me away. Michelle needs to reflect on her actions. She must face the consequences of her actions. And I will tell her the truth. I resolved to confront Michelle with the truth. Determined, I locked eyes with Michelle. Michelle looked back at me with fearful eyes. What? Got a problem? No. I'll leave, just as you wish. I checked other rooms, the bathroom, and the toilet. Don't bother looking. Everything's gone. I had it picked up by a collection service. I picked up a flyer from the living room. That's the place. I asked them. The flyer was just there, conveniently. This was something I had left in the living room. I almost let out a laugh at Michelle's shallowness. Forcing a stern face, I glared at Michelle. I hope you come to realize the gravity of your actions. With those parting words, I immediately left the house. As soon as I stepped out of the apartment, I contacted the waste collection service that had emailed me in the morning. The collection service had kept my belongings in storage. Not only did they store them, but they also moved them into the storage unit I had rented. I thanked them politely over the phone before hanging up. I intentionally left that flyer on the living room table. I thought Michelle might just do something like that. Given her personality, seeking out a collection agency would have likely been too bothersome for her. Therefore, I surmised that if a flyer for a junk removal service was readily available on the table, she might be inclined to call the listed number. I was willing to forgive her if she didn't go that far. But Michelle went through with it. My patience finally ran out. I went to the hospital to see Alex. In the hospital room, it seemed Alex was getting some explanation from Dr. Anderson. When I entered the room, Dr. Anderson left the bed and walked away. Alex's face was unusually happy. It was a shame I had to bring up such a topic when he was in a good mood. Reluctant as I was, I shared the earlier incident with Alex. His face immediately clouded over. But, it can't be helped, right? I gently held Alex's thin hand. Thank you for understanding. In fact, I had already decided where I was moving to. Anticipating this situation, I had prepared a new place. Even if I wasn't kicked out, there was a chance I would leave on my own. Either way, I needed a new place. I plan to move and start a new life with a fresh mindset. It's just that things are happening a bit sooner than planned. Alex smiled gently. I was comforted by Alex's smile. To be honest, being kicked out by Michelle didn't really put me in a bind. It just moved my plans up by a couple of weeks. But now, I'd have to live in a hotel for 2 weeks. Maybe it's my frugality that makes me think it's a waste. Regardless, I resolved in my heart to be prepared for whatever Michelle might do next. I started taking the actions I had prepared for in advance. Once the move was successfully completed and I had settled down, Michelle called me. As soon as I answered, Michelle's loud voice filled my ear. You took our money, didn't you? I played dumb and asked, huh? What are you talking about? My feigned ignorance seemed to infuriate Michelle further. Don't play dumb. It's about Dad's hospital bills. The hospital just called saying they need to be paid. I was expecting this call around now. Oh, that. I replied in a deliberately relaxed tone. I purposely hesitated and sighed. You should pay it. It's not my concern anymore. You have the living expenses that Dad transferred, right? Just pay it out of that. That's true, but I don't have the bank book or ATM card for that account. Michelle should have the insurance documents and bank books. However, the bank account balance is almost empty. The balance is gone. You must have taken it. Desperate, Michelle confronted me. The more heated Michelle became, the more calmly I behaved. I didn't take it. I said with a composed face. Don't lie. Who else could have used it? I struggled to suppress my laughter. Ever since Alex's salary significantly decreased, there has hardly been any money in that account. A simple bank statement update would reveal this, but Michelle probably hadn't done that. There was just very little money to begin with. Even with this explanation, Michelle wasn't satisfied. If you can't pay the hospital bills, you should just use your own salary. Michelle remained silent. Given Michelle's spendthrift nature, it's unlikely she has any savings. Michelle tends to spend her salary as soon as she gets it. I know how much Michelle earns. Alex had previously informed me about her earnings. Moreover, Alex even used to give Michelle an allowance. You're old enough to have some savings, aren't you? I could almost hear Michelle grinding her teeth. After a long silence, so long I thought the call had dropped, Michelle suddenly raised her voice. What's wrong with me spending the money I earned? Michelle continued to rant. You're the one who spent all the money Dad gave us, aren't you? I could hear Michelle's heavy breathing. The farce was over. I got to the heart of the matter. If it's not savings, then use the money you acquired dishonestly. I heard a thud. It seems Michelle dropped her cell phone. Probably too shocked to keep a grip on it. How did you know about that? Michelle didn't deny it. She had just admitted to the wrongdoing. There was no escaping it now. I told Michelle we would discuss the details when we met and hung up. I had sent the meeting place via email. I also attached the audio file of Michelle saying, "How did you know about that?" to the email. I had recorded the conversation with Michelle. It's always wise to have evidence on hand. Anyway, I had arranged a meeting with Michelle. All that was left was to present my evidence. The next day, Michelle showed up at the agreed meeting place. It was the entrance to the apartment building where I live. I called out to Michelle. Michelle looked up, surprised. Here? Yes. I sent you the address, didn't I? Michelle craned her neck to look up. You live in this tower? Michelle was looking at the tallest apartment in the area. Not only the tallest, but also the most spacious and expensive. An Italian sports car was even parked at the entrance. This place is worth over $1 million, isn't it? Michelle muttered. I led the astonished Michelle to my apartment. My apartment is close to the top floor. Even with the high-speed elevator, it takes a while to reach the top. During the ride, Michelle was nervously biting her nails and trembling. Clearly, she was overwhelmed with anxiety, probably sensing something bad was about to happen. Upon arriving, I unlocked the door with my cell phone. Nowadays, cell phones can also serve as keys. Michelle looked at me with a surprised expression. I entered the room without minding her reaction. The living room offers a panoramic view of the outside. The apartment we used to live in looks tiny from up here. The living room is spacious with a generous layout, and the kitchen is large. I had Michelle sit on the sofa in the living room. Seemingly tense, Michelle was clutching her bag tightly. I made some coffee and handed it to her. Michelle took the cup with a rattling sound. She was desperately trying not to drop it. "It's too spacious, it's unsettling," I said mockingly, smiling at Michelle. Michelle remained silent. "I've been preparing to live here for a while," I said. Michelle must have thought of me as a parasite living off Alex. No wonder she was shocked. "Shall we start the discussion then?" "This is Tyler, my lawyer." I introduced Tyler, who was waiting in the back, to Michelle. Michelle seemed too overwhelmed to even notice Tyler. Her gaze was unsettled, darting around nervously. Ignoring Michelle's state, Tyler began laying out documents on the table. Michelle barely responded to my attempts to engage her in conversation. Distracted by the room, she kept looking around. Just when I thought we couldn't have a proper discussion, Michelle mumbled, "How could you afford such a penthouse?" Figuring she was curious, I answered Michelle, "I just bought it, the regular way." "Don't lie, how could you afford it?" "I had the income to afford it." As my family's small restaurant began to recover, I not only advised but also got actively involved in its management. The business flourished in an exciting way, and I quit my corporate job as I got busier. Michelle likely assumed I had become merely a housewife after leaving my job. We turned the small restaurant into a corporation, and I became an executive. The business was doing well, expanding into multiple outlets like a specialty grilled chicken restaurant and a fine dining place. That's why I could easily afford this penthouse apartment. "That means I earn that much," I explained. I shared the story of my family's business. Michelle only knew that Alex had helped when my family's restaurant was struggling. I then told her how my family's business eventually came to support Alex's company and that I had become an executive. Hearing my story, Michelle slumped in defeat. I wondered if Michelle was feeling regret, but she suddenly looked up and said something unexpected. "All right, I'll live here too. Let's make up." What is she talking about? That's what I thought, but I just silently stared at Michelle. "There's enough space here for my room too, right?" I glared at Michelle with a cold look. "Save your dreaming for when you're actually asleep." She was completely unfazed by my sarcasm. "I'm serious," she said. That's when Tyler cleared his throat. He probably couldn't bear to go along with Michelle's absurd statements any longer. Tyler handed Michelle a bill. Looking at the bill, Michelle's face turned pale. Her hands trembled, and sweat formed on her forehead. "This is a fraudulent bill." "It's a phantom charge," Tyler stated. After graduating from college, Michelle had worked at Alex's company. However, she conspired with a client company to make unjust charges to the company. The illicit gains were shared with the accomplice from the client company. To set Michelle up, I had hired a detective agency and conducted a thorough investigation, using whatever I could. Then, an individual from the client company who conspired with Michelle leaked information to Tyler. I immediately consulted with my in-laws, who had stepped down from the presidency to become chairpersons, about the matter. Then, my in-laws were furious and promised, "We'll administer an appropriate punishment." Embezzlement on the job, Quite the crime indeed. Tyler takes in my words. If convicted of fraud, you could face up to 10 years in prison, not to mention civil damages. Wait a minute, there must be some mistake. Michelle desperately tried to deny it. However, the evidence was complete, and the accomplice had confessed. Admit it. The charges against you are only getting heavier. Just as I thought Michelle was gripping the bill tightly enough to tear it, she suddenly stood up. I'm sorry. Michelle apologized. Sorry doesn't cut it. I spoke in a flat, emotionless voice. Especially since you've done it habitually. It's deemed extremely malicious. Michelle collapsed to the floor and began to apologize. I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me. No chance. With my cold response, Michelle's face became a mess of tears. Her usually impeccable makeup was completely ruined. If things continue this way, losing your job will be the least of your worries. You might even get arrested. It was all Michelle's own doing. Your apologies won't earn you forgiveness. Michelle's tears and runny nose left dark stains on the carpet. Please forgive me. Just staying silent about it is enough. I turned my back on Michelle, who kept apologizing. This isn't just between you and me. Michelle seemed unable to let go. She made an outrageous offer to me. Then, I'll give you money. I'll charge the company again and give you that money. I sighed deeply and pressed my hand to my forehead. Nothing I said would make a difference now. Michelle had no intention of repenting. She was solely focused on navigating her way out of the predicament. There's no helping you. You need to be properly judged, I said, revealing the voice recorder in my hand to Michelle. Michelle seemed to realize she had made an outrageous proposal. She trembled, covering her mouth with her hand. I'll submit this as evidence to the police, I declared. Michelle kept her head down. It was as if something had been drained from her. Tyler and I then escorted Michelle out of the room. Leaning against the wall, she staggered toward the elevator. Once Tyler had departed, I collapsed into the depths of the sofa, exhausted. It was finally over. I reported the outcome to Alex via email. As planned, Michelle was criminally charged by the company. Michelle was arrested, and the employee from the partner company was indicted while on bail. Michelle had been dating this employee. Whether Michelle really had romantic feelings is unclear. It's highly possible she pretended to like him just to use him. Michelle is now detained in a holding cell, awaiting trial. She also faces a lawsuit for damages from the company. Michelle was disliked at the company, and perhaps it was a form of retribution. Being the president's daughter, she was exceedingly unpopular among the employees. She also had a haughty attitude toward clients, which negatively impacted performance. Not only was her attitude presumptuous, but Michelle also made many mistakes. There were numerous complaints, but no one dared to criticize her because she was the president's daughter. This is what I heard from Alex. Alex is still hospitalized, focusing on his treatment. Alex entrusted the presidency to Michael, his reliable executive vice president. This decision had been made quite a while ago. With Michelle gone, the transition proceeded smoothly. Alex is fighting his illness. Despite the challenges in obtaining a discharge, a pioneering treatment available in Germany offered new hope. Holding the published scientific journal, Dr. Anderson and I had many discussions. Dr. Anderson understood and agreed, and Alex will soon go to Germany for treatment. Of course, it's private healthcare, not covered by insurance. I'm not worried about the treatment costs. If necessary, I can just sell the penthouse. Alex will surely recover. And he will surely smile at me with that gentle smile again. I can hardly wait for that day.